All right. Good morning, everybody. It is Jillian. And yeah, when you think you get it and there's a lot more to get, oh gosh, and I'm bringing it now back to 1939 and 1945 and also making the connections of the History Channel always airing the World War II footage all the time. Why we hear in the conspiracy world that the system took the scientists from Germany over here to America. But it wasn't like they were going to do the same thing over again. I don't know if even World War II was allowed to happen to see how bad it would get when someone is given absolute power to then corrupt absolutely. And so we saw, obviously, the atrocities if you've studied the Holocaust and World War II, and also have an interest to see that the background of that person, of the Hitler, of that person who rose to power that quickly with the support of millions and millions of people. And so just like the giants way back 6, 7, or even maybe 2 or 3 or 4, 500 years ago, okay, maybe back in the Middle Ages, the giants were a large conglomerate of a bunch of little humans. And so the giants, if I'm going to take this back to the giants like Goliath and all the other giants of the past, the Nephilim, they were trafficking women, they were impregnating women, they were sexually abusing women, I am sure, way back 5,000, 4,000, 2,000, 1,000 years ago. And so, which is why then the giants had to be eradicated, because they were probably, eating humans and probably destroying the women of the time. And so then you look at now humans are just a fraction of what the giants were, and then take it even down further, the lower, like the orders of magnitude, when you go from more to less, the family, when you have one human, a whole human, and that human is releasing his sperm and also having the eggs be fertilized and developing an offspring. Even the sperm are offspring. Okay, that is pieces, that's fractions, that's percentages of a person. And so then the family is like a division of pieces of that person. And then the person who has been born from a host, like a mother, then has to figure out how to become whole or sustain deficits. And so then Hitler, who was a large conglomerate type of god, demigod, who had the power of life and death over so many people and was able to galvanize such a large following of people who had no problem blaming somebody and genociding massive amounts of people. Then you look at your Facebook and you look at, first of all, you look at what his premise was, is blaming the Jews, the gypsies, the gays, and anyone else that wasn't like him, and for the misfortunes of Germany, for his own misfortunes. Then you see who raised him. You see what Clara Hitler was like, given some of the research that's on Wikipedia and wherever else. You see what his dad was like, okay? And then you look at all the families out there with children, and they're in deficit, so they're procreating. And I told you, the 3-generation rule, the third generation not only will bankrupt their family wealth, but the third generation will be so much in deficit that they'll also try to bankrupt society through their activism of blaming, because they're in such deficit. And they don't realize that all the self-harm from the alcohol, the drugs, the operations, all the diversity they're taking in, they're not releasing and assimilating to, then causes them to go on the hunt, to go find the enemy. And that's where you get the religions. with the Satan and the Savior all in one person, because Hitler was a dichotomy of a Satan to the Jews and the gypsies and the gays, and he was a savior to then the German Gentiles, I guess. And so that's how quickly and why he rose to that much power, because he was two things. He was both to people out there. And when you have that same mentality out there in the population with people who are developing children and families on such an aggressive rate, generation after generation, and then you give them something to blame, the parents, air, food, water, and therapies, and a religion, a race, a group of people, spirituality, just someone that doesn't fit within their paradigm of what is right, then you're seeing the little Hitlers all over Facebook rise up and spew the rhetoric like you would watch Hitler do when he was doing those speeches that were so, like I said, were so full of energy, and the guttural speech. If you listen to some of his speeches, when you watch now the History Channel or watch even just some of the Netflix shows, movies, documentaries on Hitler and his speeches, you see how dynamic he is. And he definitely is he's smart, yes, attractive on some level, but he attracted so many people that were looking for the answer, looking for a savior, and also looking for someone to blame. And he told all the people that were looking for a way out of their misery, he told them who the enemy was. Now go look at your Facebook. Now look at all the activists on Facebook telling you who the enemy is. They will say it's Trump. They will say it's Biden. They will say it's genetically modified. They will say it's the fluoride in the water. They will say it's the salt. They will say it's the sugar. They will say it's the meat, milk, cheese, eggs, fruits, and vegetables. And they will then give you a savior. They will give you a savior of iodine, ivermectin, the chili juice, a therapy, a surgery, an operation, same thing. A religion. They'll say you have now take Christ into your name or something. They will say, here, my energy healing massage therapy will be the answer for you. Now you see people on Facebook who have developed a Satan and also want to be your savior. And now you're watching the little Hitlers all over Facebook spew their stuff. And they say they're oppressed, as they are oppressing animals and children and friends and family. Why do I say they're oppressed? That because they have absolute power over that animal's life and death. When you have a cat, a dog, any kind of domesticated animal, even a farm animal, you are acting like a Hitler, having complete control over the life of that animal, that dependent called your child. You think you own those animals. You think you own your children. You think you own your friends and family. And that's how little Hitlers all over the world have risen up and developed so many families and then become predatory as they are sexualizing everything out there. Okay? I mean, it is so wow, in your face. And I'm telling you, it took me 7 years to figure it out, because I knew there was something wrong. There was something wrong even a long time ago. I just couldn't figure out what it was. But I had to go through the trauma, the experiences, and even deal with just figuring out what I was programmed for. And anywhere I went, it was all the same type of people. Everywhere I went, it was like I was always different, because I knew something was not right. So that's why I kept going from group to group to group, state to state to state, maybe from boyfriend to boyfriend, trying to figure out what the fuck here. But come to find out, then when in the conspiracy world, they're talking about Operation Paperclip and bringing the scientists over here and studying, all the psychologists and psychotherapists and everything, studying the background of Hitler and the people that followed him back then incorporate the way he was raised back then into your families. And so if you want to control a population who's going to have children, who's going to want to be rich and famous and baubles. Now you look at the Netflix shows like Selling Sunset, Selling the OC, Dubai Bling, Selling Beverly Hills, looking at all the Hollywood and the politics and all the people in other countries that are so like wrapped up in wealth and anger and baubles and children. You're going to see now that is the path to depopulation, is the trappings and the cancer of extreme wealth and power over other people. I mean, it is so strategic and phenomenal because you're getting whatever you want. You're getting whatever you want. When you have that kind of power and reach and pull and influence to the point of where you are drunk with power and you have such riches, nice pools and nice clothes and all this makeup and plastic surgery, and you're allowed to have all the family you want, then you're going to see how it is that people like a Hitler, because there's people like him before. There was all the different Roman emperors. There are all the different kings and queens of the past. But Hitler was the last real major despot that was so worldwide that gave us that kind of figure to show us what we cannot do again. But we will show you in smaller, controlled circumstances. And so that's what the whole politics too is, watching somebody galvanize a base, allowing them to act out what they would do when given the chance. And they are given the chance in politics, in the music industry, in the activism industry, or acting industry and activism industry, what they would do to con their followers into buying something to inflate the price and then pull the rug out from under people. They're seeing how people actually con others into taking their resources, even selling them something that they claim is going to save them from whatever enemy that's out there, which then also contributes to the depopulation at the hand of yourself, because you signed on the dotted line with your consent. And so also the sexuality. People are like, oh, I want to have a family. Well, the system isn't going to stop you, but they're definitely going to tell you how to raise your kid. They will encourage you to raise your kid with so much love. And the whole love, remember, Hitler loved his mother and he respected his father, because his father was a bit more brutal. Okay, probably beat him. Yeah, okay, that sucks. But it was his mother that made him be, it was a combination of both, of an indulgent mother and a brutal father. And then you get the Hitler when all the conditions are right. And of course, when you have unfulfilled potential, unmet expectations, potentially even unrequited love, then you also can see how even in our population, some men and women are and bitter around different situations like relationships or different types of people. And so, yeah, so now you're seeing with the background of him, what then has given rise to the people all over Facebook who are developing children, who are being told how to raise their kids, be told to love everyone to death. And you hear it even in these shows. Oh, I love my mom to death. I love my wife to death. I love my family to death. Just even aside, spells and curses and gifts aside, the fact that that's exactly how the system programmed you to love your sons and your daughters to death, to the point where you shower them with so much love and protection, which I can understand in this very predatory environment, but even that will cause them to be weaker. So then what do you do? Well, see, here's the thing. You're kind of fucked. You're kind of screwed right now, because our society is so predatory that even if you did say, okay, I'm going to be a little bit more, whatever, if you did try to be something other than you were, do you think your kids would survive the environment out there and survive all the predators out there? You think they would be strong enough against some really charismatic, slick-tongued salesmen selling them a dream of relationship and being taken care of, or money and fame and fortune. And you see how greedy even the parents are, then developing the greedy children who will be so ripe for someone to manipulate the hell out of them. And that's where you're like, that's why those who understand where I'm coming from and have the capacity to become whole again, and they're not influenced by too many people around them, and they have the power to change, and they have the freedom to change, no one in their world is stopping them, they might have a chance to become whole again. But there are some people who are so far gone, who are so much in deficit, and they have pigeonholed themselves in their relationships and lifestyle that they can't get out. And so then what's going to happen is that they're, as much as they're in deficit, they're going to find a way either, well, they can't blame anyone really, because what are they going to blame things on? Those who already bought into the system in deficit, who realize they can't blame any of the therapies because they're in the medical system. Maybe they're a nurse, maybe they're a doctor, maybe they're a holistic professional. So they're not going to blame what they're already doing in their professions. And so who are they blaming? Or are they just accepting the fact that they're just going to die someday, so they're just going to find every way possible to make it as comfortable as possible? And so, you see, I'm not in everybody's minds. Everyone has someone who thinks is the enemy. But when you're in a political thought process, whether it's Democrat, Republican, you already are blaming someone for what's going on in society and foreign affairs and the economy and all the things that are going on. So even your politics, your sexuality too, your politics, your sexuality, your religion, your science dogmas, you're saying that it's somebody else's fault, therefore you need to buy into this type of political thought process. And here I have the answer. I have a therapy. I have, love and devotion and family and friends in order to alleviate somebody from the suffering. And so even if you're not actively out there pounding the gavel of blame, the politics, the biases that you hold already imply that there is somebody else at fault and therefore you are right. And so it's oh gosh, it's so insidious. Okay. And so I'm going to go to the last post right above my last video. And I said, absolute power over another life who depends on you for everything corrupts absolutely. And so we are watching it in all families with animals and relationships. Hitler personified. An observation that a person's sense of morality lessens as his or her power increases. Right? So your power increases. So you're using up so many resources that are not being replaced to balance you out, and that includes even your hormones. So as your power increases, then the sense of morality and all of that then lessens, because what are you going to do to try to alleviate the discomfort of being in deficit? Then there's the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, and wow, society's going into decay. So an observation, a person's sense of morality lessens as his or her power increases. The statement was made by Lord Acton, a British historian of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which is why families and close-knit friends are dangerous to evolution, because they will stop each other from evolving. And the king bees and the queen bees, drunk with power over their offspring and the followers, will justify violence in the name of their clan. And it could be violence, could be like surgeries, because that's violence against your system. It could be taking antibiotics or drugs or alcohol, or getting into fights, or hunting someone that they think is threatening their very existence, but who's doing nothing to them, has never walked into their house and told them to do anything. But now they're projecting that this person, this thing, that thing is the enemy, and they will search out that situation. And so do you see now this thing with projection? This thing with projection. Do you see the 1% accusing any of the population of being an Illuminati? Do you see the queen, the king, anyone in Bilderberg? Do you see who's accusing those of being the Illuminati? So do you see the 1% accusing all of you of being the Illuminati? No, you are accusing them. And guess what? Accusations are confessions. You are the Illuminati, the capstone in your life, in your little kingdom of activism and family. Everyone you accuse of in the left, right, center is your personal confession around your children, death and dying. Remember, I am not a mother or in the activist world or selling you absolution or remedy. I am observing all the little Hitlers on my Facebook accusing the 1% of being the deadly Illuminati. But when you think about it, it is actually you and your following. When you are advocating that there's a savior and a Satan, and you are telling people who the saviors are and who the Satans are, and even you are saying that you are the savior while somebody else is the Satan. And that includes those in professions where they think they're saving people with their protocols, whether it's talk therapy or life coaching or energy healing or even some kind of protocol or a supplement or a detox or a prescription drug or an over-the-counter drug or a diet. Now go observe the conspiracy world pounding the gavel of hate and accusations, personal confessions, basically. Your health and wellness practices and lack of assimilation are the proof. Please tell me how oppressed you are in your nice warm bed. Okay? And so I also know that the sexuality is how they also built in the depopulation agenda through sexuality, through pleasure, drugs, alcohol, sex, all the different distractions and gatherings. And so when I seen that, those memes all over TikTok and Facebook and even just hearing about, not tonight, honey, I have a headache. Okay, let me tell you, if sexuality for women, if women really truly like getting screwed by a man, there would not be any kind of joke around, not tonight, honey, I have a headache. We wouldn't have men or women expecting their significant other to perform even once a month, even once a year. You see, when we build our relationships on sex and family, and then when those hormones get used up or destroyed, or it becomes painful because that is not supposed to be doing that forever. You were bred to be fertile and to be a broad mare, and then use that as a platform to be married and have a relationship and even mix, economics together, mix finances together to develop something. But people do not develop beyond sex and family. And so when the sex is gone and when the family is gone and the person's deteriorating, why would the family be gone? Because the kids are out there now doing their own thing. And so what does that couple have left when they have built their life on sex, drugs, rock and roll, and family? Then there's divorce. Because they never developed themselves intellectually. They never developed themselves emotionally, even physically. And so what kept them together was maybe the children, maybe their friends, maybe their family. Maybe it was the sex, yes, and it was other things around that. But then people's hormones do change. And if they have nothing else to fall back on, then they're going to make it mean that when you don't give sex to somebody, when you don't give them a family like a child, that they don't respect them. Or they don't think that there's no relationship. And so what I am doing, what I'm saying is that, you know what? Me in the J world, where my hormones now are not in that fertile stage of wanting to go fuck everything and procreate and have children and base my relationship off of sex, drugs, rock and roll, that there is actually a brain somewhere that needs to be used and expanded and developed. That then when you are not putting so much emphasis on your sexual parts and then using drugs to keep that going, that you actually become a clear-headed person who would have longevity as a possibility. And that I actually have something more than sex and family to offer to my husband. My husband, what does he offer? He offers keeping us alive through his job. He's very capable, very strong. Absolutely very sexual, yes. Full of testosterone. And I was full of estrogen, very estrogenic, way back in 2010. So that's what brought us together. And out of survival too, but also out of sexuality, survival, and how are we going to make it in the future? And what kind of values and what kind of life we're going to develop for ourselves. And it changed for many. It changed a lot. Evolution happens. You're not supposed to stay the same. And so when you see that idiom, not snipe honey, or if you hear that, not snipe honey, I have a headache. And that includes the men too. It means that now it's time to change the relationship from being one of family and sex and drugs and alcohol and rock and roll to now, wait, maybe it's time to put some emphasis on the brain and get the body back from all that abuse, from the children, from the husband, from the wife, from the friends, from all the things out there that are causing people to be in such deficit and disease. And that should clue you in that these women and men are being trafficked and being forced culturally and psychologically into sacrifice themselves through the sex and the family and the drugs and the rock and roll and all that stuff. So not saying, honey, I have a headache. Hitler honored his father but loved his mother. What if Hitler honored both his mother and father? Would humanity be different? And would we have to endure World War II? And so love and indulgence is so destructive and dangerous. And I knew this. Respect was always missing in families predicated on love and indulgence while wielding their power over dependents and pets. Absolute power always corrupts absolutely. Hard lessons, really hard lessons. And I will be hated for this notion, which proves my point about family and cures. Any change and threat to people's power base called their family, children, and pets and way of life is met with violence, vitriol, and blaming, and even genocide when given the chance. Which is why you set your daughters free from marital enslavement to a man or a woman. It takes a married woman like me to see, I can see and have experienced all three worlds of single, married, and married with freedom, no kids, or enduring harsh sexual expectations like some women must endure and never talk about, so they must be under the influence. This happens in all politics, all religions, and science dogmas predicated upon all sexuality, all of them. Okay, so even the puritanical Christians who are like, oh gosh, that's all Satan and demons over there, and they're forcing their daughters to have a baby and have sex with some stranger, and who knows what their habits are in the bedroom and what kind of abuse she's enduring from her puritanical Christian husband, or Jewish, or Muslim, or Hindu, or atheist, or energy healing, whatever. You don't know what kind of abuse she's enduring because it's justified through the family and the religion and the culture. And so how will you set your daughters free and sons free from that type of thing? Most will not. Most will traffic their own children into these types of deadly, deadly relationships. But you will figure out a way, or you won't. I hope you do, for your daughter's sake or for your son's sake. But if they can't do it on their own, see, here's the thing. What do you mean they can't do it on their own? If they were able to get their life back under the household of you, mom and dad, and you got your life back, and they got their life back, and they learned stuff, and they found a job, and they learned to live within their means, and they weren't run by their sexuality and their hormones, they wouldn't get in trouble with all the drugs and alcohol and sex, and they were expanding their brain, because what do you do in place of pleasure and entertainment and drugs, alcohol, and sex? Oh, you expand your brain. It's called learning, intellectual capacity. Challenging oneself to understand concepts that maybe were foreign to them. The excitement of learning, expanding your brain, and knowing how to verbalize and express yourself is a freedom like no other. But when you don't know how to verbalize and express your ideas and yourself, and even your fears, and even your disgust, and even your frustrations, then it manifests and it gets filtered through drugs, alcohol, sex, and love and activism and hate and then violence. And then that's why we have so many despots and trolls and predators in our society acting out their frustrations because they can't verbalize it. They were not trained to verbalize their thoughts and feelings. And so they're basically looping. And that's what happens when you are training your daughters and sons to only be a body for somebody else to use and abuse, whether it's in science or somebody who needs to get off. And so, remember, some of these mothers and grandmothers act like the madams, and they condone their sons to do that, as well as foster their daughters into these situations. Nobody talks about this. And just remember, I'm not projecting any current circumstances. I am not under the influence, and I have no cancer and disease. I have no children, and I've seen so much of the world. I've seen enough of the world to understand that it's a lot of redundancy. You know, I don't need to go to Brazil. I don't need to go to any other country besides the ones I went to know how humans operate and what the culture is. Okay, so the food's different. Maybe the terrain's different, but the people are the same. Human trafficking everywhere, and sex and family everywhere, and under the influence in drugs and alcohol and sex everywhere. It's not that phenomenal. It's not that original. It's all the same shit out there. So no, I don't need to go out there and travel all over the place. I've seen humans. I can see humans like that across the world in different languages right here in Ohio. And that's why I stay home and stay safe. So why do I think this idiom exists? Because men have a lot of aggressive sexual expectations and appetite, and they damage the women. And the men manipulate the fuck out of these situations. That's why this exists, as far as not, tonight, honey, I have a headache. That should clue you in on these women, that these women are forced into these situations. And yes, some men are forced into these situations because the women are insecure, just like the man. And so the typical trope is a wife rejecting her husband's advances by saying, not tonight, honey, I have a headache. However, headaches associated with sexual activity are very real, not very funny if you have ever experienced one. And they happen to be more common in men than in women. But it's the direction of the woman. But really, you know, it's both. So then I'm like, so no, I would not want to marry my daughter I don't want my daughter to be married to anyone out there. I don't trust what you're producing out there. At this point, if I had a daughter or a son, I would not want them to be going after marriage and children. It's too dangerous. For her, for him, and for the other people. Thank God I have no kids, because I couldn't handle the suffering of watching them go through the bullshit. Men and women destroy each other via sex because they made it mean it was and is the only way to show love, respect, and relationship. Yeah, the system programmed you to cannibalize your partner to death. And when the partner says, hey, no, I cannot, or I have had enough, or they're fighting a condition, then the person thinks there's something wrong with them or him or her. They go on drugs or see a therapist to please their mate, who now is actively looking for another mate to screw. That is why marriages fail. People cheat because they never develop anything else in that relationship except for sex, family, and pleasure. They didn't bother to develop their brain or take that relationship to a different level, not through a sexual level, but to a different level of relating. One person or both people did not advance their intellectual thought process. It was still all about the body and getting off or finding someone to get them off. And people die trying to prove their worth. It's really messed up out there. That is why I feel sorry for the daughters and sons going into these situations set up to fail, when all the hormones and his body parts get used up, and then cancer, and then death. While these little young 25-year-olds shake their ass on TikTok and say all women should please her man no matter what, she is promoting the female enslavement and just regressed women back to the dark ages. Yeah, you raised her, mom and dads. Your daughters and sons were programmed to destroy via sex and pleasure. Wake up. That's why there's so many hot girls all over OnlyFans, Instagram, and Facebook, and they can't find people to go and marry them. No, because they can see you from a mile away. Or they'll just use you and promise you the world and use you, and then you get pregnant, then they walk away, and now you have a single mom who's being destroyed not only by her society and her family, but also her own children. That was the depopulation agenda. Selling these girls into a dream of Prince Charming and happily ever after. That's what you're saying. And so now you see these chicks, yeah, they're all skinny, full of hair and makeup and lips, and that's about it. They were programmed to do that. That's why you stay far away from these types of girls, because they will destroy you through their vagina and all the babies. They were not programmed for anything else but for sexual pleasure, and that's it. And it's pretty obvious, because what else are they advertising, offering to the world? Definitely not her brain, only her body, and she's all lips and hair. And in the meantime, saddle you with a baby to go and support and work you to death. And she's blowing kisses at you. So that's how she's trying to attract. And tractor beam somebody and taking their resources while she's thinking that this is Prince Charming who's going to support her and give her everything that she hopes for. And then come to realize that fantasy is just a fantasy. Absolutely, that whole notion is just a fantasy. The reality of a man having to support that child forever. The reality, men finally realize that when they realize how much it's going to cost to have a baby. And what kind of job they have to be and how much you're going to have to make. And having to deal with her and all of her expectations. And so even those who have so much money out there, like Dubai Bling, you have these women who are so entitled and full of themselves, acting like they are God's gift to everybody, and they torture people around them with their tempers, with their expectation. They're needing more and more and more and more and more until they completely use up the resources in their environment, use up the resources in their family, use up the resources everywhere. Completely depleted, and they're angry on their way out the door, blaming somebody. And so I said, I'm not trying to offend anyone or target anyone, but to expose you to the programming, the insidious programming of sexual slavery and the family slavery and then annihilation. And it's so subtle, but also in your face. When you're in it, you cannot see it until you finally can look at your own lifestyle and life and the health issues you have sustained subscribing to these traditional methods of depopulation. And so I had to take someone off my Facebook because they were flattering me, which I kind of felt that flatter. I felt it in my gut, but I wasn't, because they weren't saying anything. They were just flattering me and that, with nothing else attached to it. But they were actually, what do you call it? Searing me something up for the kill. So they were setting me up for them to promote whatever their agenda was. Buttering me up. That's what it is. They were actually buttering me up before they got their actual intention of agenda. All right. So I wrote this and then I had to delete the person because I have no issue with him, but I'm going to have to keep monitoring his comments and having to keep responding and giving my side of it, because I know people out there who have an issue with food. They have an issue with the West. They have an issue with their own belief systems that are being challenged by mine as far as sex and procreation and where babies come from. And though they'll try to be polite about it, like, of course, we need to, it doesn't mean that I need to keep allowing somebody to challenge me, even politely. I will play for a minute until I see then somebody's actual agenda, which is they're promoting a doctor. And also emphatically, politely disagreeing, which, okay. You know, disagreements are like assholes. Everybody has them, doesn't mean you have to always show them to people. Put it on your Facebook. If you believe in something, put it on your Facebook. If you have only a few followers, doesn't mean that you go and try to convert my followers. They already know all the different stories out there. They can look at you. They can look at your Facebook. But there's no reason why anyone should try to convert somebody else. So my intention is to redefine relationships between men and women, women and women, and men, built on partnership intellectual capability, longevity, and not children or sexual appetites. If we were to take away aggressive sexual appetites and take away the need for children and pets, the couple would have so much freedom to evolve, save themselves from disease, death, and increase their financial potential, and even develop a beautiful life to share with someone who is not actively trying to destroy them in body, mind, and spirit. Maybe down the road, if pets are allowed to evolve and not be treated to death in the veterinary system, being butchered by everything, pets could be allowed. That is freedom and sovereignty, in my opinion, my world. I developed this world, at least for me. My husband has the freedom to choose what he wants. I did this for myself. Imagine a couple who had the same intention and multiply that by 1,000,000. Society would not go into decay like it is right now. And so when you're living indefinitely and you're a whole person, you're not going to be procreating, you're not going to start wars, you're not going to be all about diets, and you're going to live on, and then the system will have their insurance policies in case, like, a meteor comes in and takes out a certain amount of people, that we have a way to develop more humans to keep the infrastructure going, or to keep the human race just, evolving and changing, because you got to have people to do it. But right now we have people procreating on bodies in deficit that eventual human extinction, like happened in the rat population, would happen at some point if you don't redirect what's going on. And so that's why we're trying to now stop people who are so at a deficit reproducing kids that eventually will tear down society, but also not be able to procreate anymore. And so, but then you can't legislate morals out there and stop people from doing that. And so then you speed up the environment potentially, and you let them have whatever the hell they want, and they will then get lost and die in excess. But then we have an insurance out there called the artificial uteruses, okay, that then we're able to develop children without enslaving a human. And so we are watching the fall of society going on right now, and it is through the family and extreme sexual predation with astronomical suffering, died suddenly, or managing an incurable disease. And so this person said, well, without procreation, we will be over at the end of our lives, and humanity would end as the last one of us died. That said, what are we doing as a species now? And it's actually worse than the fat, in my opinion. Than the fate, in my opinion, the fat. And I said, Andy, oh no, there are ways to have babies without human hosts. It's called artificial wombs. And you have licensed government cuddlers, and they have to raise the kids for the society they're going into so they don't become a drain on society. And there will be some women out there who will be used as baby makers with their consent. Some of them have like 10 kids. But eventually that will go to the wayside. Why enslave a woman to do that when you don't have to? You can develop babies in the lab, and they will be completely viable human beings and not satanic like some of these people are saying. The world is changing, so we don't have to enslave anyone to populate the human race. Because remember, the woman becomes damaged when she gets pregnant. That's what causes fertility, is damage. Because then the body senses senescence. It senses that it's going to die from that damage. And so then it goes and uses and activates the reproductive system, which then you have the sexualities, all sexuality, to then ensure to carry on the human race. But what kind of humans are we carrying on? And will they be able to become whole again? And not even that, will they be contributing members of society, or are they going to wreak havoc and be little monsters that we have to go and regulate? And that's what's going on. We have little monsters in our society that are being procreated on bodies in deficit that we have to regulate. Okay? So remember, the woman becomes damaged when she gets pregnant. That's what causes pregnancy to begin with, was the damage. And then you also alleviate the whole point of ownership, owning your children, owning humans. And so, hold on. And so I said, it is something to get used to, especially if you are so used to traditional. Okay. He says, I prefer that our tribulation keeps the universe alive as though we were antibodies inside of a giant being. It's not tradition that without procreation we die. Unfortunately, it is a science fact. The tradition is the bully men force their women to take 100% of the responsibility and the cost. See, science fact is based upon the fact that he will treat disease to death. No, you don't have to die. He obviously believes opposite of I, and that's fine. But he's saying it is no tradition that without procreation we die. Not necessarily. We can procreate in the lab. It doesn't have to be the traditional way. We can procreate in the lab. It's not that difficult. But remember, we have a split in our society of the old way where women are enslaved. He's saying that only the bully men cause the women to be enslaved. But no, even the men that are not bully men. Just any woman having a baby is enslaved with burying that baby and then enduring the damage of even getting pregnant, enduring the damage of that baby sucking the life out of her, enduring the damage of episiotomies, enduring the damage of having her vagina be now gigantic, enduring the damage of even different diseases during that gestation period, enduring the damage of having to raise this child that has predisposed issues. And then we go back down the same path again of treating all disease. And then that kid is in deficit procreating. And then we're back to square one again. Right now, what I'm offering is the fact that, yes, okay, we can have people make babies, but are we allowed the mother, the host, to become whole again? And does she have the capacity to? Or is she too far gone? And does that child have the capacity and the allowance to become whole again? And we can't legislate that. So then when people become relatively infertile in the future, which is going to happen, then it's up to the system, which they will ensure the human race will not go extinct. They will have babies in labs. Because right now, parts of the world, we have 1 billion people in Africa. And the system will make sure that the human race will never, ever go extinct. And we will balance out life and death as if we are balancing out our own hormones of retention and release. We're not trying to destroy anything. We're just retaining what is viable and releasing what is not. That's the J world. We're not doing any antibiotics. We're not doing any surgeries. Some of us. And we are trying to become now whole people, expanding our brain, not focusing so much on the body. But unfortunately, this young gentleman, I don't know if he's so young, has a very different opinion, and he's trying to be polite about it. But I still see that it's challenging. And he's also blaming the sugar. Because he then said, the Western diet being forced down everyone's throats is a big problem. It's a child's diet full of sugar. Carbohydrates are sugar. I recently realized, duh, okay. For the benefit of profit. See, here we have a type of little health Hitler. Okay, we've been making the same mistakes since and probably right back to the start. Leaders need to evolve, but they like it as it is. Is back in the Sumerian pantheon. And so when you think about what your DNA is, so I said then, Angie Earl, the Western diet, actually is what made people stronger. Sugar is not poison. Lack of salt and release is the issue. When you blame the food, you don't take accountability for how you manage your immune system. That's why people blame and starve themselves. That's why the kids are starving and malnourished, because the mother takes the food away, blaming the gluten and the sugar and the salt and the meat and the milk and the cheese and the eggs until there's nothing left. Starvation is the issue for many people, which is why we need to guide reproduction carefully. Because dying, starving people are very violent and intolerant, and they become health Hitlers. Ooh, I gotta write that down. Health Hitlers. Okay? Now, no offense against him. There's so many like him. But we have so many health Hitlers in the medical holistic system. Okay? Our DNA, oh yeah, here we go. Starvation is the issue for many people, which is why we need to guide reproduction carefully, because dying, starving people are very violent and intolerant. The reason why we have so many people in families is because the one member was starving and damaged, needing to procreate to carry on the human race. Our DNA requires the amino acids and the glucose. You starve the body of that, the DNA breaks down. A person does die, and maybe they might give off a few children, but weaker generations. And so imagine every generation having children and starving the children, they eventually will become infertile. That's all out human extinction. This should have been the last comment, and we could go to our corners and agree to disagree, but in a polite way, which we did. The comment I deleted was again him belaboring his disagreement and blaming the sugar, and then recommending a doctor a protocol blaming the sugar for heart attacks and strokes. See, and the people are blaming the salt for heart attacks and strokes. You see how the health Hitlers play the blame game? So I'm not here to propagate. That's where I draw the line. I'm not here to propagate the medical or holistic. No matter how polite you are or how much you flatter me, flattery only gets you so far, and it becomes disingenuous with an agenda. And so I'm not looking for followers or agreement. Just respect my information. And this is not a place to promote your information or protocols. And so I also said, Andy Earl, way in the future, after the Great Reset, we have stronger specimen of people. The system will allow certain people to develop children because they're not as damaged. And I'm sure to have a combination of lab-developed children. Right now, we are developing children from very damaged people, and they are wreaking havoc and need a lot of assistance. And you're right, we need more responsible males out there having children in their 80s, living indefinitely, not having sex at 15, which is basically the 80s. And so, yeah, when people believe they should die someday, of course they're going to believe in going to procreate until you're seeing now little monsters all over society wreaking havoc, robbing you, and taking your stuff or harming you. So I said everything is controlled, everything is contrived, even the weather is engineered. The system will not allow humans to go extinct. Right now, we are in a vetting process. You are being given the choice to adapt or perish. And so I said, from the family of division, because then you have a division of labor, right? To then the J world. Immortality, a whole person. The last 7 years is me regaining all of what was lost and what was not allowed to develop, and releasing the demons. That was the last 7 years for me. And so I'm not a health Hitler anymore. But we have right now so many people who are in deficit breeding future and current health Hitlers because they are in such deficit. And so that's why I was interested in reading Mein Kampf, because this would be an interesting reading to understand the mind of a despot and what situation would develop someone such as this. Because then you study the rhetoric of those who rise to a certain political power claiming revolution. And Hitler did have his demons. And what were the demons and who contributed to those demons? It starts off with the parents. And then unrequited love or unmet occupational expectation, unfulfilled potential, needing to blame something. And I did the same thing. Blamed the candida, blamed all this stuff that I thought was wrong and everything else. And so what were those demons and who contributed to those demons? It starts off with the parents, and then unrequited love, occupational expectation or unmet occupational expectation, unfulfilled potential, needing to blame something. Then the seduction of absolute power, corrupting absolutely. That's why you be careful of those who are saviors, who will be a Satan to somebody else. It's very easy to develop a dichotomy in one person. And so the trolls claim to be the saviors to the people who are curious about the J world. And they also are going to be a Satan to me or those that are like me. Because I'm telling you, the people that follow me even back last 3 years were under the attack of the health Hitlers out there. And I did enact also health Hitlerism myself until I got away from all the blaming. Until I got away from that mentality and scaled myself back to one, not encourage division, of which you're seeing all these health Hitlers out there encouraging division and family and sexuality and violence. And so I said, learning never exhausts the mind. So as long as you don't focus on so much of the body, you could have a very sharp mind, Maybe that's why a lot of men were innovators in their time, especially back in the Middle Ages. They weren't used for sex or baby making. They had a lot of time to think, and they didn't get too much disease or their periods or get pregnant. It's all relative. But yeah, I can see why the men were able to be the innovators and the movers and shakers, whether it's the black men or the white men, because they weren't dealing with having so many children and all the disease that comes with having children. Because disease is deficit. That child took percentages of your life force. Now you have to go and recoup, and you have to eat food. And when food then makes your body release the damage and take on substance, people don't want to feel that. And so they grow up in deficit. And these poor children are growing up in deficit. And of course, highly sexual. They're getting their periods sooner. They have made their identification, the orientation sooner. People are like, oh my God, the system did it. The parents did it. No, it was the fact that we have believed in so much procreation that, yes, the maturity levels of these kids are earlier and sooner, but also their sexuality. And that's why these kids are highly sexual at a younger age. And it's pretty scary when you see it. But also with climate change, you're seeing it faster. So now you're able to make the connections faster. They drew it out so they can actually watch it. But now when they accelerate through climate change, now you're seeing some of the correlation equals causation. Now when it comes to people who are like all about oppression and activism, all right, so many of you have animals, friends, family, and children. Most of you are not single on your own, taking care of yourself on some level. Some of you are married and on your own, and your husband's doing whatever. But he's still around, but he's taking care of business, and you're able to be on your own. So long story short, if you have an animal, you can't claim oppression. If you have children, you can't claim oppression from the government. If you have a family, one can't claim oppression from the government. If you're married or in a relationship, you can't claim oppression from the government. If you have a huge social network and a friend base, you can't claim oppression. If you remedy a disease, you can't blame the government for giving you the disease. Me dies. You did it to yourself. Projection. You must set yourself free in every oppressive situation you put yourself in, and that's friends, family, marriages. If you think that you're oppressed, it's everyone around you and your belief system and the job and everything else that you put yourself in that you're feeling oppressed, and also all the little things inside of your body that are causing oppression. Don't ask people to set you free unless you're willing to die for their beliefs. So if you're going to go ask the government and the medical system and the holistic system to set you free from all the painful stuff, and you can't be cured in a dynamic environment and growth will always happen, then you can't claim, you can't then blame them that when you pass away, because you can't put all that stuff to the back burner. It has to be released and you have to feed it. And if that's not your forte and you want someone to cure it, the end result's going to be death, the morgue, someday, if not sooner. I gotta pee now. I gotta pee. And so blaming any kind of food for cancer, disease, and chronic illness, heart attacks, strokes, and autoimmune disorders is acting like a health Hitler. Anything that is FDA approved is not the reason why you have issues. The fact every generation is weaker because of all the diets and starvation and therapies is why people are getting so much disease. When you keep procreating on bodies in deficits, what do you think is going to happen to every generation of children thereafter who are starving and malnourished, even in the West? The Western diet is the best diet for people who need food. That's why the world is starving, because they don't have the Western diet. And men and women out there outside of the Western diet are starving, skinny, and malnourished, and very dangerous. But it seems that parts of Africa has a great intake of food because of the people are so strong. Your DNA needs glucose and carbohydrates. Your DNA needs the sugar and the salt and the meat and the milk and the cheese and the eggs and the veggies and the fruits. Diabetics are starving. So are heart patients and cancer patients. They're starving. Anyone in the medical holistic industry are starving, and they keep compounding their disease by more of the remedies, the protocols, and the diets. And so, yes, they're going to be very sexual, violent, and probably have a bunch of kids who will eventually be infertile at some point. And so starvation is the number one reason why people die suddenly, and they are so active and their cardiovascular system cannot afford it. And so they get cardiac arrest, dead. And that's why some children and weak adults will not last too long during this climate change, because they're starving and their children are starving. And with this new juvenile respiratory virus making its way all over California, and I'm sure the United States, it will make kids weaker because they will get treated for it. Dogs are already succumbing to respiratory illness all over the United States. We're hearing about that. This great reset had to happen, not only because of society going into decay, but also because the body is in such deficit, developing weaker and more aggressive offspring, dying to live. And then I said Hitler mentality of blaming activism. Now I'm going to redo that and call it health Hitler, because that's what it all comes down to. The reason why people are blaming cultures and why there's so much violence and wars where you have to arm yourself to the teeth to protect yourself from those who are lobbing grenades is because they are in deficit. They're starving, and they're using remedies, and they're on drugs and alcohol and lots of sex and projecting having so much family. So everyone that has deficit, that is blaming someone for something, I don't care what it is, religious, politics, science, they have enacted health Hitlerism in their world. And so Hitler mentality of blaming activism, projection is the closest thing to a confession. You would never know the hypocrisy of someone unless they blame everything on a person, place, or thing, food, chemical, element, air, food, and water. Fill in the blanks, which actually reflects their true nature. Accusation, projection, and confession. And then they say you're supposed to die someday. That's science. You're supposed to know. Science says that if you don't do this, 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 and this, you will die. But if you do this, 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 and this, you will live. That's what science is. It's if-then formulas of equations with things that you fill in the blank that then either contribute to death or contribute to life. That's it. But to say that you're supposed to die someday, that science, no, that's a belief. That's where people have the beliefs and the science mixed together. When you believe people should die someday, that's a religion. And we have many religious people out there in the world that are extremely deadly, and they've already told you you're supposed to die someday. And they want all girls to have babies. They don't want to ever free these women from being the one to populate the human race. And so that's why we're in a great reset, because there are men like that and there are women like that will enslave both the man and the woman until their dying day. And so I said, oh yeah, if there are microplastics in your body, then you have an immune system to release those demons. Seed oil is not poison. I saw somebody post on their Facebook, and it was a spoof against the World Economic Forum. They have a food pyramid. At the top of the food pyramid, this shows, I'll tell you what they said. I'm not going to post it because I'm not trying to advertise it. But give me 1 second. I'm not going to point her out. I'm not going to say, oh, it's her, because she doesn't know any better. She just repeats whatever she thinks is the enemy. That's what most people do. And then, of course, she has a bunch of family. Bunch of kids. Okay, give me 1 second. Here we go. She posted 2030 food pyramid, World Economic Forum, and it's total spoof. Top of the pyramid, antidepressants. The second part of it, soy milk. The third part of it, bugs. The fourth part of it, seed oils. The last part of the base, microplastics. I mean, obviously it's a spoof. But you see the intolerance in that person. Okay? You see the intolerance. Give me 1 second. Oh, it's pretty crazy watching people now. It's crazy. Health Hitlers. I love it. And so, if there are microplastics in your body, then you have an immune system to release those demons. Seed oil is not poison. Soy in your products is not poison. Yeah, kids need milk. But if they have allergic reactions to milk, then soy milk until they can actually bring the milk in their body. And someone's going to have to watch that process. And if they never do, then that poor kid is going to be lacking the necessary fats and amino acids and vitamins and nutrition from the milk. And yeah, they will be in deficit. Anyone that's allergic to milk is in deficit. They're starving. And so soy in your products is not poison. Soy is just another protein, okay? It's not poison. We have people in such deficits that they are actively starving themselves, their family, and also their audience with the fear campaigns because of their own projected deficits. And misery loves company. And so if they're starving, they will actually starve their audience and friends and family in the process. You are the reason why these great resets are happening, because you refuse to understand what is going on. And so we have 1 billion of Hitlers running all over, health Hitlers running all over the world, telling everybody that food is poison, and telling people that they cannot get rid of microplastics they might hold inside because they have a very sluggish immune system. Which is why my information will fall on deaf ears on so many people, because they are starving. They can't comprehend my information and they refuse to, and their children will suffer for it. That's why I feel sorry for the children out there, because they're raised by adults who don't get it and will not get it, and they will blame on their way out the door. Health Hitlers. It's quite extraordinary how the system figured out how to use Hitler's mentality in your family because you refuse to evolve. Hitler was just one of many people back in 1939, but he happened to have all the right conditions to have him rise to power. Remember, he was supported by millions of people, and I'm surrounded by people in the virtual world who are sympathizers of someone like him and actually want to be him. And they will be like him to their own families. That's how the system had figured out a way to isolate the Hitler mentality to their own families and friends by their own choices. And I'm watching it right now, and it's really very interesting. It's fucking insane. And so again, I said, I reposted or I shared one of my own posts from the family, which is division, to immortality, a whole person, right? And so remember, we were programmed to have children and think that having family is the way to be. That was the culture to study humans, when they keep dividing themselves into families and children. So when you're playing in a petri dish and you're watching a cell keep dividing and dividing and dividing and dividing, and you see then how fast the population would grow from that division. But then what kind of cells are you producing? So imagine then, take the petri dish and put that in a suburb with a culture, a program. So you have nature and nurture mixed together. And then you add, and so now everybody all separated, right? All over the world. That was the petri dish. It was basically all the continents, the cultures, the races, the religions. So you had Africa over here, India over here, China over here, Russia over here, Europe over here, United States over here, Canada, and South America, or North America, South America. You had Australia, New Zealand, Antarctica. So now you have all these different petri dishes of cultures of people. Study them, study the way they do things, study everything, infuse even certain kind of programming. And then you bring them together like in the US or in the UK or in Canada and see how they get along. See what kind of division of cultures, of cells, of people, what they manifest, what they propagate, what kind of behaviors, what kind of health issues, what kind of religions pop up. And you're saying, okay, from the petri dish to then the population, the community, now you're watching people enact what they were raised to do. And some of them are pretty destructive. And so there's so much division because that's what the system propagated back in the 1950s when they were doing these controlled experiments, okay? And so remember, you were programmed to have children and to think that having family is the way to be. That was a culture to study humans when they kept dividing themselves up to families, into families and children. Just like the giants were reduced down to the humans we see today, the giants were destroying the humans by screwing them as well as eating them. And yes, the women were trafficked even 6,000 years ago. And now women are trafficked in families, forced to be somebody's entertainment piece and brood mare. And so the family will screw her out of existence while she keeps bearing very weak children who will be very intolerant as they get older until that genetic line completely disappears or is used up. Some of these women have no choice but to live out their usefulness until they outlive their usefulness and then die suddenly. And that's really sad, and there's nothing they can do or I can do because they don't have the support system. They are relegated to be somebody else's piece of whatever. You just hope they have a good life. So that's why my world exists. So people who have more to them than not can become whole again. even if you had kids and you're relatively still strong and a whole person, you can come back and get your life back. It's those who had a bunch of children that might have an issue of getting their life back, because getting your life back is painful, and you have to eat all food, and you really couldn't treat disease, really. But again, that's a balancing force of treating disease and eating food, and then less than the treating of disease, eating more food. And it's like, yeah, you really have to have the support system and the infrastructure. And some people are a slave to their children, their family, their in-laws, and to their significant others. And that's how I know not everyone will do my protocol, because it's too painful and they're too far gone and they are in extreme deficit. And so the system will use them until they can't, and that person dies suddenly or they get treated to death. Okay, so now you see the method to my madness. And so I made some stuff. What is it? I made deer this morning. I didn't make deer, but I cooked it. Yeah, so when we are developing children with deficits, completely activated into the politics, religion, and science, dogmatic world of activism, now you're turning them into a little Hitler, preaching whatever word of blame and belief, and they become extremely formidable in the future, which is why the system is a surveillance system. The system knows exactly what you're producing out there and are giving you everything to blame and give credit to as far as Satan or Savior. And they know who you're blaming. And they know who you're stalking and trolling, intentionally crossing boundaries. And they're watching for those who would hurt somebody else when given the chance. Just watch the trolls out there. And the mothers and fathers actively supporting their sons and daughters to be preachers and leaders in activism, the next new Hitler of Hitlerettes laying blame on somebody, or a person, place, or thing, or food, or element, or mineral, while they love everyone to death, trying to save them through death. Oh yes, that's why we have the political system, to watch people rise up and see what they do when given absolute power. And then the system will regulate those who are too influential. And that was the 1960s and even the 1980s. And even out there in the world. Which is why they allowed you to sexualize everything, because that's how you will depopulate yourself and your family and your husband and wife through consent. You signed on the dotted line. And you also put yourself on the holistic and the medical system, as well as your family. You seriously have to take responsibility for what you have done, and some of you will turn around and some of you won't. And the ones that can't turn their situation around, they will blame everyone else instead of realizing they need to start changing if they even have the capacity to, or the support system. That's why you're in a surveillance system. Okay? So now you see how everything works. Now you get it. Now you understand why everything was sexualized. Now you understand why the family was promoted. Now you understand the 1950s and Universe 25. And now you understand where I'm coming from. And when you, like, I don't have any kids. And if I had a kid, I would be in not only in so much deficit, but I would be suffering. And I would be tied to whoever I had that kid with forever. And people evolve and they change, and the people that you get engaged to for marriage or love or sex are not always people that you necessarily want to stay with forever, because it's the hormones that are speaking, not the logic and the rationale or the rational thinking. It's the hormones. And some people's hormones, especially when they're young, it's all about sex and love and fantasy. And some people can withstand the damage their partner is doing to them, and they have to keep performing in order to keep that relationship. They haven't developed anything more than just being a body for somebody else's pleasure. And that's what a lot of these girls are going into. And some of these men are being enslaved by the procreation of having the kids. And then you watch the suffering. And the suffering is astronomical in the families, in the hospital system, in the marriage system. It's really bad out there. And so that's why I'm encouraging you not to encourage your children to have family. But some people have no choice but to get married and have children, because that's what they were programmed to do. All right, so that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to talk to my husband, but I pretty much said everything. Now I got to put it all together. But health Hitler is the new term now. And that means everybody that's an activist, because it all comes from lack of balanced health. That's why you have all the disease and cancers and politics and the blame game and the conspiracy world. Bye.